Sofia Marlowe learned this state by rhythm rather than map. The way the marble floors held cold longer in the mornings. The exact moment the espresso machine sighed to life. The footsteps that meant laughter, and the ones that meant someone wouldn't be laughing much longer. She moved through it all quietly, a maid among men who mistook silence for emptiness. Her uniform was chosen carefully. Too large at the shoulders, too long in the sleeves. Fabric meant to soften lines that had once been honed by years of training. She kept her hair pulled tight, her face bare, her posture slightly rounded. Every movement was deliberate, calibrated to suggest clumsiness rather than control. The work itself was simple: polish, pour, collect, disappear, but it took discipline to do it badly enough to be believed. She saw everything. The way hands hovered near concealed weapons. The flicker of temper before it boiled over. She noted exits without looking at them, counted men without appearing to count. When arguments sharpened and voices dropped, she found reasons to be elsewhere. When violence brushed the edges of the room, she became part of the furniture. Observing was safer than intervening. Observing was penance. At night, alone in her small room above the West Wing, the memories returned uninvited. The ring lights, the sound of gloves meeting flesh. The moment Valentina Cruz fell and did not rise, Sofia could still feel it in her bones, the sickening certainty that something had gone wrong. The crowd's roar collapsing into stunned quiet. The medics moving too fast and not fast enough. The monitors later, the flat line that refused to bend back into life. She washed her hands for a long time after those dreams, as if the guilt were something that could be scrubbed away. It never was. It lived under her skin, a constant reminder of what she was capable of when she stopped holding back. So she made a vow and clung to it like a lifeline. Never again. Never step into a ring. Never raise her fist in anger or ambition. Strength, she told herself, was a fire that burned everything it touched. Better to smother it. Better to be small. In Dante Russo's house, that choice felt almost possible. The danger here was structured, predictable in its own way. She could exist on the margins, invisible and intact. She could serve meals to men who spoke casually about ruin, and remind herself that she was done with that world. Here, she was safe. Here, she was nobody. And as long as she stayed that way, Sofia believed she could live with the ghost she carried, so long as no one ever forced her to remember what it felt like to fight. The poker night changed the temperature of the house. Laughter grew sharper, heavier with alcohol and ego, and the air filled with the smell of cigars and money being risked without consequence. Sofia moved between the men with a tray of drinks, eyes down, steps measured, already feeling the shift before Dante spoke. He watched her longer than usual that night. Not openly. Just enough. "Come here," he said casually, as if asking for a refill. She stopped beside the table, heart steady, face blank. Whatever this was, she couldn't flinch. Flinching invited curiosity. Dante rose, gesturing toward the open space at the center of the room. "We've been sitting too long," he said to his captains, amusement threading his voice. "Let's see something different." Victor stood at once. He was enormous, all blunt muscle and confidence, a man who had never learned restraint because nothing had ever demanded it of him. When Dante's eyes returned to Sofia, the room went quiet in anticipation. "My maid boxes Victor," Dante said lightly. 3 rounds. Nothing serious. The laughter that followed made Sofia's stomach tighten. This wasn't a request. Refusal would raise questions she couldn't answer. Compliance meant stepping closer to the things she had sworn never to touch again. She nodded once. The furniture was pushed back. Jackets came off. Someone poured another drink. Sofia slipped off her apron with hands that trembled just enough to look right. Fear was expected. Control was not. The first punch came fast and careless. She let it graze her shoulder, stumbled back, sold the impact. Too weak, and she'd be crushed. Too skilled, and she'd be unmasked. Every second was calculation. She moved just enough. Slipped when she had to. Took a hit she didn't need to. Let her breath hitch, let her balance break. When she struck, it was awkward. An elbow thrown late. A fist landing where Victor wasn't guarding simply because he wasn't expecting it. Luck, the room decided. desperation. Pain bloomed along her ribs. She welcomed it. Pain kept her honest. Victor grew frustrated. His swings widened. She stayed inside his reach, close enough to survive, careful not to show why she knew how. When she went down once, deliberately, the laughter returned. When she got back up, slower than she could have, it turned to interest. By the third round, her vision blurred the edges, but her timing stayed intact. She landed one clean shot to Victor's midsection. Not enough to drop him, just enough to remind him she wasn't finished. The bell came like mercy. Sofia sank to her knees, breathing hard, bruised and shaking. Applause followed, loose and careless. Someone called her lucky. Someone else laughed and said she had heart. She didn't look up, but she felt Dante's gaze settle on her, sharp and unmoving. Not on her injuries, not on Victor's frustration, on the way her breath steadied too quickly, on the way her hands stopped shaking the moment the fight was over. Chaos. Everyone else saw. Dante saw something else entirely. And for the first time since she'd arrived at this state, Sofia knew that being nobody was no longer guaranteed. Dante Russo replayed the fight in his head long after the room had been cleaned and the men had gone home. Not the spectacle of it. Victor's sighs, the laughter, the bruises, but the spaces between moments, the pauses, the angles that didn't make sense for a frightened woman who had never thrown a punch before. He remembered the way Sofia recovered her balance too quickly after a stumble meant to look accidental. The way her eyes tracked Victor's shoulders instead of his fists. The way she breathed when it was over. Controlled, measured, wrong for someone who had just survived on luck. Dante had built his life on noticing what didn't fit. By morning, he had ordered a quiet search. No theatrics. No pressure. Just names, histories. Threads pulled gently until they either broke or led somewhere interesting. Sofia Marlowe was a clean slate on paper. No social media. No family listed nearby. Employment history that dissolved into gaps and short-term placements. The kind of absence that was either meaningless or intentional. Within 48 hours, it stopped being either. The file landed on his desk without commentary. Dante read it alone. Sofia Marlowe, alias, the Scarlet Phantom, undefeated, 34 wins, titles across multiple divisions, a style analyst described as surgical, efficient, beautiful in the way only discipline could be. He watched clips without sound, her movement stripped of crowd noise and commentary. The woman in the ring moved nothing like the maid who scrubbed his floors, except where it mattered most. The balance, the patience, the refusal to waste motion. Then came the last fight, Valentina Cruz, championship bout, a clean exchange, a fall that never recovered. The report was clinical. No accusations, no criminal charges, just a line that changed everything. Injuries incompatible with survival. Sofia's disappearance followed within days. Contract abandoned. Promoters furious. A career erased overnight. Dante leaned back in his chair, the weight of the knowledge settling in. He could see the path clearly. He could sell her location. He could use her name. He could turn her into leverage or profit or insurance. He could own her the way he owned so many things, through control and consequence. Instead, he thought of her kneeling on the floor after the fight, bruised and quiet, eyes fixed on nothing. Of the way she flinched not from pain, but from attention. Of how carefully she had avoided hurting Victor when it would have been easy to do much worse. This wasn't a woman hiding from danger. This was a woman hiding from herself. Dante closed the file and sat with the choice longer than he usually allowed himself to. Exploitation was simple. Understanding was not. One required force. The other required patience. For the first time in years, he chose a harder option. Not because it was kind, but because it was honest. And because whatever Sofia Marlowe was running from, Dante suspected it wasn't finished with her yet. Dante summoned her at twilight, when the estate settled into a quieter, watchful calm. The library lights were low, the shelves rising like sentinels around a single desk. A folder lay open there, pages aligned with care. Sofia stopped just inside the doorway. Her chest tightened, but she didn't turn away. Dante didn't pretend. Your name is Sofia Marlowe, he said. And before you worked here, you were known as the Scarlet Phantom. The name landed with a familiar weight. She closed her eyes, just for a breath, and when she opened them again, the room felt smaller. She nodded once. Denial would be pointless. Worse, dishonest. He slid the folder toward her. Inside were clippings, records, stills from fights frozen mid-motion. Her body in perfect alignment. Her eyes calm. The last page was thinner. A report. A date she never forgot. Valentina Cruz, Dante said quietly. The final bout. Sofia's hands curled, then relaxed. She didn't get up, she said. The words came out steady, practiced. I threw a combination I'd thrown 100 times. Clean, legal, and it broke something it shouldn't have. Her voice wavered despite her effort. The crowd went silent before the doctors did. I knew before anyone told me. She spoke then without stopping. About the hospital, the machines, the family she didn't know how to face. About promoters who talked about liability and future earnings, while a woman lay dying because Sofia had been better at her job than anyone else. About the nights afterward when sleep came in fragments and the ring lights burned behind her eyelids. I left because I couldn't trust my hands anymore, she said. Because every punch felt like a question I didn't have the right to ask again. Dante listened, unmoving. When she finished, the fire cracked softly in the hearth. I made a vow, Sofia said, lifting her eyes. I don't fight. Not for money. Not for pride. Not because someone wants to see it. I won't be the reason someone else doesn't go home. There it was, the line she had drawn and lived inside of for 2 years. Dante stood and walked to the window, looking out over the grounds he controlled so completely. I could turn you in, he said. There are people who would pay well to know where you are. I know, but I won't, he continued. He turned back to her. Because I don't think you're hiding from consequences. I think you're carrying them. She said nothing. I'm not asking you to fight for me, Dante said. I don't need that. What I need is understanding. I've spent my life delegating violence, paying others to carry it, so I didn't have to examine it. He met her gaze. I want you to train me. The word startled her. Train you? Teach me technique, discipline, control, not how to hurt people better. How to know what I'm asking when I put men in harm's way. He paused. In return, you have my protection. No one touches you. No one comes for you. Sofia searched his face for the angle, the hidden cost. Found none, just intent. I won't break my vow, she said. I'm not asking you to. I won't teach brutality. Then teach restraint. The offer settled between them, unexpected and heavy. Sofia exhaled slowly. For the first time since she had disappeared, someone wasn't asking her to be less or more, but to be honest. I'll try, she said at last. Dante inclined his head. That's all I'm asking. And in that quiet room, with the truth finally spoken, Sofia felt the faintest shift, like a door unlocking, not away from her past, but toward a way of carrying it. Dawn came quietly, pale light bleeding into the courtyard while the city still slept. Sofia was already awake, sleeves rolled, hair tied back with deliberate care. She hated mornings like this, cold, honest, unforgiving. They reminded her too much of who she had been before she learned how to disappear. He arrived without entourage or arrogance, just a dark coat and the stiffness of a man used command rather than correction. She studied his posture the way she would any novice fighter. Power sat heavy in his shoulders, but his balance was wrong. Too much tension. Too much ego. We start with footwork, she said, not asking if he was ready. He frowned. I expected something more direct. Sofia met his eyes, unflinching. Direct gets you hurt. Control keeps you alive. They moved in silence at first, breath fogging the air. She corrected him with words, not blows, adjusting stance, shifting weight, forcing him to unlearn instincts built on dominance. Every time he tried to overpower the movement, she stopped him, again and again. You're angry, she said finally. I'm focused. No, she replied calmly. You're forcing it. That was a lesson she returned to each morning. Violence to her was not chaos. It was discipline, precision, knowing exactly how far to go and when to stop. She taught him how to breathe through tension, how to let strength settle instead of explode. When she demonstrated, it was effortless, almost gentle. When she corrected him, it was firm but never cruel. Frustration simmered between them, unspoken but sharp. He wasn't used to being wrong. She wasn't used to being seen. Some mornings, their tempers flared, sharp words, clipped movements, a step too close. Yet neither walked away. Over time, something shifted. He began to listen. Truly listen. His movements smoothed, his strikes grew quieter but more effective. He learned restraint, and in that restraint, power. Sofia noticed a change before he did. The way he waited for instruction. The way his eyes followed her hands, not her face. Respect grew in the spaces between commands and corrections, in shared exhaustion, in the nods exchanged when a lesson finally landed. One morning, as the sun rose fully and painted the courtyard gold, he held his stance perfectly, balanced, controlled. Sofia allowed herself a small smile. Good, she said. It was the first praise she'd given him. And somehow, it meant more to both of them than any victory either had known before. The attack came without warning, shattering the careful calm Sofia had begun to trust. One moment, the estate breathed in its usual rhythm. Guards changing shifts, the distant sound of a child laughing near the garden. Then the gates screamed open under force. Gunfire cracked the morning open like splintering wood. Santoro. The name moved through the air faster than the bullets, carried in shouts and panic. Men poured in with ruthless coordination. Faces masked, movements practiced. This wasn't a message. It was a purge. Sofia stood rooted near the colonnade, her body reacting before her mind could catch up. She counted exits, angles, threats. The old instinct surged back with terrifying clarity. And then she saw the children. They were clustered near the east wing, frozen in confusion, one of them crying openly now as the sound of violence closed in. Innocence, untrained, unprotected. Her chest tightened. She had sworn never again, never to let her hands become instruments of chaos, never to cross that line she'd buried beneath discipline and distance. Violence had been theory, technique, control, something taught, not lived. A body hit the marble steps nearby. Blood spread, dark and real. The vow cracked. A Santoro gunman rounded the corner, weapon raised toward the wrong place. Sofia moved without permission from thought. She disarmed him in 3 precise motions, using his momentum against him. He went down hard, stunned but breathing. She didn't look back. More followed, shouting, screams. Orders barked in panic, now as defenders scrambled to respond. The air filled with smoke and chaos, discipline dissolving into survival. Sofia fought differently than the men around her. Where they rushed, she redirected. Where they fired blindly, she closed distance and ended threats with brutal efficiency. Not rage, never rage, but necessity, sharp, unavoidable, unforgiving. Still, every strike cost her something. She dragged the children behind cover, shielding them with her own body as rounds tore into stone. One clung to her sleeve, shaking. She spoke softly, voice steady despite the thunder around them. Stay here. Don't move. When it was over, the silence felt heavier than the noise had been. Smoke drifted through the ruined courtyard. Survivors emerged slowly, counting losses with hollow eyes. Sofia stood apart, hands trembling now that there was nothing left to do. The reality of what she'd done pressed in, undeniable. Violence was no longer an idea she controlled. It was a force she had unleashed. He found her there, bloody but alive, looking at her not with shock, but understanding. The Santoro cartel had made their move. And in doing so, they had dragged Sofia fully back into a world she had tried and failed to leave behind. The second wave came faster, crueler, as if the first had only been a test. Sofia felt the moment before it happened, the tightening of the air, the shift in sound that warned of intent. Fear threatened to root her again, but this time she did not let it. Paralysis was a luxury the children behind her could not afford. She stepped forward. Gunfire erupted near the garden wall, Santoro men pushing through smoke and broken stone. Sofia moved with purpose now, every choice stripped down to its core. Not to punish, not to prove, only to protect. She closed distance where guns were useless, redirected force instead of matching it, dropping attackers without excess. Wrists twisted, knees buckled, bodies fell, alive but removed from the fight. Restraint was her weapon. She felt Dante somewhere to her left, fighting with a fury sharpened by fear. He was strong, decisive, but reckless. She shouted once, a sharp command, pulling him back from overcommitting. He listened without question, trusting her judgment even as chaos raged. A child screamed. Sofia turned just as a gunman broke through, weapon lifting too fast, too close. There was no time for calculation. She moved on instinct, stepping into the line of fire, arms outstretched as she shoved the children behind a fallen pillar. The impact came like a hammer to her side. Pain exploded through her ribs, hot and breath-stealing. She staggered but stayed upright, forcing her body to obey as she finished the motion, disarming the shooter, dropping him hard. Only then did her knees give way. She hit the ground beside the children, blood darkening her clothes. The world narrowed to sound and pressure, and the taste of iron in her mouth. She focused on breathing. In. Out. Control the shaking. Dante reached her in seconds, fury dissolving into something raw and unguarded when he saw her wound. "You took the hit," he said, disbelief cutting through his voice. Sofia looked at the children, safe, silent, eyes wide, and nodded faintly. They couldn't. The fight ended soon after. Santoro's men retreated, leaving destruction and answers in their wake. Dante stayed beside her as medics worked, his hand steady on hers, eyes never leaving her face. In that moment, he understood. She wasn't driven by hunger for power or the thrill of violence. She didn't fight to dominate or destroy. She fought because she chose to stand between danger and the helpless, no matter the cost of herself. The vow she had broken wasn't one of restraint. It was a vow to never care again. And as Dante watched her fight through pain with quiet resolve, he realized Sofia was the most dangerous kind of person in his world. Not because she loved violence, but because she refused to let it win. Ricardo Mendez arrived as if summoned by the past itself, stepping through the gates with the confidence of a man who believed ghosts should stay buried. His suit was immaculate, his smile faintly familiar, and his eyes, sharp measuring, found Sofia instantly. The air changed. Sofia felt it in her bones, the old weight settling on her shoulders. Las Vegas rushed back in fragments of neon and blood and promises made in desperation. She didn't hesitate. "I'll handle this," she said quietly. Dante started to protest, then stopped when he saw her face. This wasn't a request. It was a necessity. They met in the open courtyard, far from weapons and witnesses. Ricardo studied her, as if trying to reconcile the woman before him with the legend he remembered. "I heard you were dead," he said. "I needed to be," Sofia replied. Silence stretched between them, thick with years of unfinished truth. Ricardo's hand twitched, not toward violence, but memory. "You disappeared after the fight, after everything we lost." "I ran," she said simply. No deflection, no justification. "I was afraid of what I'd become if I stayed." He laughed once, sharp and bitter. "We all were." Sofia met his gaze fully now. "I made choices. People paid for them. I won't pretend otherwise." There was no apology wrapped in excuses, no attempt to soften the past. Just truth, laid bare and unguarded. Ricardo's anger faltered, replaced by something heavier. Grief seeped into the space vengeance had occupied for years. "They told me you turned cold," he said quietly, "that you stopped caring." Sofia shook her head. "I cared too much. That's why I left." The admission broke whatever resolve he'd carried with him. His shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of him. "I blamed you because it was easier than blaming the world." They stood there, two survivors of the same fire, finally acknowledging the scars instead of swinging them like weapons. When Ricardo spoke again, his voice had changed. "Las Vegas is still watching. he said. And Santoro's reach is longer than you think. Sofia nodded. She already knew. I didn't come for revenge, Ricardo continued. I came because the past doesn't stay buried on its own. When he turned toward Dante and the others, there was no hostility in his posture, only resolve. The ghost from Las Vegas had chosen to stop haunting and start fighting forward. Sofia watched him go, a quiet ache settling in her chest. Some wounds never healed cleanly, but for the first time, grief no longer demanded blood. It demanded purpose. And in that, she had found an unexpected ally. The name returned quietly, without announcement or spectacle, not on posters or belts or whispered rumors in underground halls, but spoken plainly by Sofia herself. The Scarlet Phantom was no longer a threat or a legend. It was a chapter reclaimed, not relived. She didn't want the title back. She wanted the truth of it. The gym opened in a converted warehouse on the edge of the city, sunlight pouring through high windows onto clean mats and reinforced rings. No locked doors. No shadows. Dante worked beside her from the first day, hauling equipment, listening more than speaking. There was no hierarchy between them, no protector and protected, just partners building something deliberate. From the beginning, Sofia set the rules. No unsanctioned fights. No training through injury. Medical checks weren't optional. They were sacred. Fighters learned how to fall safely before they ever learned how to strike. Control came before power. Restraint before dominance. Violence, she reminded them, was not a language to be spoken carelessly. Doctors visited weekly. Physical therapists had offices on site. When fighters pushed too hard, Sofia stopped them herself, laying a steady hand on a trembling shoulder and saying no, firmly, without apology. Some left. Most stayed. The ones who stayed learned respect. On opening day, she stood in the center of the gym and spoke one name, Valentina Cruz. There was no grand speech, just acknowledgement. A fighter lost in negligence. A friend erased by a system that valued spectacle over safety. A silence fell as Sofia placed a simple plaque on the wall, not as a warning, but as a promise. We remember. We do better. Ricardo handled the things Sofia refused to touch. Permits, funding, pressure from promoters who wanted blood and glory. He shielded the mission without reshaping it, using his reach not to control, but to clear the path. Where once he had chased vengeance, now he invested in prevention. Dante never stood behind her and never in front. He stood beside her, taking instruction when needed, offering counsel when asked. He trained. He learned. He bled sometimes, but never recklessly. In the ring, he trusted her. Outside it, he trusted her silence. People came expecting a myth. They found a woman, not a maid who bowed, not a weapon shaped by other men's fear, not a ghost defined by rumors and blood-soaked memories. Sofia moved through the gym with quiet certainty, correcting a stance here, steadying a breath there, whole in a way she had never allowed herself to be before. The Scarlet Phantom had returned, not to haunt the world, but to heal it. And for the first time, Sofia knew she did not need to disappear again to survive. If you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to subscribe and give this video a like. It really helps support the channel. We'd also love to hear from you. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Your support means a lot, and we truly value our community.